at the sex organ level. They're just not getting androgens because the SHBG limits availability at the sex organ level when it's too high or when it's not low. That's what it does. Listen, this is very important. In this study, which we're going to break down in this video, they go to test the free hormone hypothesis in vivo. This is with a living organism, not a petri dish. We examine total and free sex steroid concentrations and bioactivity, the activity they have on biological systems, on target organs in mice expressing a human SHBG transgene. The sex hormone binding globulin increased total androgen and estrogen concentrations via hypothalamic pituitary feedback regulation and prolonged the ligand half-life. Despite, now this is a really important part, despite markedly raised total sex steroid concentrations, free testosterone was unaffected, while sex steroid bioactivity on male and female reproductive organs was attenuated. Meaning, yes, the higher the SHBG, the less bioactivity at reproductive organs. Okay, reproductive organs you're going to get from androgens. This is why chemicals like Proviron and anything else that will lower the sex hormone binding globulin gives you more biologically available testosterone, free testosterone. But importantly, as this study points out, you get more activity at the tissues. In some sense, this explains, besides some of the androgen receptor modification, why Proviron helps erections and the sexual system so much for guys that are on TRT. Now, Proviron isn't the only thing that can raise your free testosterone. I'm going to show you bloods of the difference between testosterone cream and testosterone propionate, albeit these were different doses, but just how much more prop increases free testosterone. So sit back, relax, strap in. We're doing a deep dive, boys. We start the video. Look, Cortex Labs is a performance optimization and hormone consulting company for men. We got a range of different products ranging from the source list, which breaks down vetted sources for any anabolic, DHT itself, Proviron, any test of any ester that you can possibly imagine. It's down in the description of this video. Go get it. Torque Stack is basically Adderall without the side effects. It is still on sale for buy one, get one free. The code is down in the description of this video. Coaching, if you need to hire me for TRT protocol restructuring, that is primarily what I do, in addition to helping men with sexual dysfunction ongoingly for longer one-on-one packages. You can hire me for any of that stuff in under a minute at livecortex.com. All right, let me start off by just saying that Proviron is the savior of a lot of people's TRT protocols. There's a lot that we don't know about testosterone replacement therapy. It has been postulated by some people that I don't agree with on many other matters, but that I do agree with on this, like the TRT hormone optimization camp, at least a couple of the folks within there, namely Keith Nichols, that exogenous testosterone is not as effective as your own endogenous testosterone, whether that's at the receptor side, the genetic side, the bioavailability side, or some other unknown side. This is why some guys, I mean, this is just rang true in my coaching practice over and over again, will require much higher levels of testosterone than they previously had as a natural in order to get symptom resolution, especially on the sexual system. Now, Proviron is a tool that we have available to us to effectively get in the middle of that problem, right? To increase the bioavailability of the hormones that you are using or injecting or applying, and therefore get more action with higher affinity, with a longer duration at the androgen receptor in the organs, in this case, that matter, which would be the male organ or the penis. In all of my countless hours of research, trying to get to the bottom of very sinister types of sexual dysfunction, I have come to learn that a good degree of sexual dysfunction is not located in the brain, that the sexual function is, I mean, to simplify it, I don't want to make it super simple, but just to simplify for the context of this conversation, at the bioavailability level of hormones, okay? So you need more bioavailable hormones in a lot of these cases for a long duration of time at high saturation points. And the ultimate endpoint of that, which is number 2, at the tissue level and specifically in the penis. A lot of guys that have sexual dysfunction literally just have an atrophied male organ, whether it's fibrosis, downregulated endothelial function, downregulated nitric oxide function, and a substantially awry veno-occlusive operation, okay? Meaning they can't keep blood trapped in the junk, otherwise known as venous leakage. Proviron in high dose androgens, testosterone namely, dramatically tend to help this situation. In this video, I want to break down why, but I also want to explain to people why Proviron is so effective for fixing erection issues on TRT, not on TRT. Generally speaking, Proviron's fucking awesome. Okay, so this paper, boys, is titled Sex Hormone Binding Globulin Regulation of Androgen Bioactivity in Vivo. Validation of the free hormone hypothesis. The free hormone hypothesis simply says that the more biologically available or free hormones you have, the more effect you're going to get at the tissues. Now, this has been debated back and forth, but ultimately this paper sort of solidifies what we all have known and actually see at the 5,000-foot view when we're dealing with clients, in my case, or when you're experimenting yourself with things that lower the SHBG, that you end up getting more free testosterone and a better effect. Now, to understand what we're going to get into, let's just quickly read this paragraph. Stick around because this is really important. A central dogma, meaning just kind of repeated status quo in endocrinology, the so-called free hormone hypothesis, states that the biological activity of hormones is determined by their free, i.e. non-protein bound or non-SHBG or albumin bound concentrations. In the case of androgens and estrogens, free hormone concentrations and bioactivity are believed to be determined by sex hormone binding globulin. The SHBG is a liver-secreted homodimeric glycoprotein with high affinity for DHT, testosterone, and to somewhat of a lesser extent, estradiol. Androgens and estrogens are key regulators of reproductive organs. All right, we're going to come back to the organ side of this so much in this video, so please pay attention, as well as other sexually dimorphic tissues like muscle, adipose tissue, and bone can directly or indirectly following conversion into DHT via acting on the androgen receptor or estrogen receptors and following aromatization of T into E2. In normal adults, about 55% of testosterone in men or estradiol in women is bound to circulating sex hormone binding globulin. All right, so for normal people, a good degree of testosterone is bound, but it's 55%, right? It's not 100%, it's not 75%, it's just 55%. The remainder is loosely bound to bulk carrier proteins like albumin, and only 1 to 3% of sex steroids normally circulate freely, meaning unbound or uninhibited and able to affect tissues. Okay, so that's just a breakdown of the free hormone hypothesis. A lot of your testosterone is bound to SHBG, a little bit to a lesser extent to albumin. The rest is bioavailable, and that's what affects the tissues. Again, you get, as the abstract said in this study, as I broke down in the beginning, you get attenuated, meaning limited function at the sex organs, okay, when your testosterone is bound to the SHBG. ChatGPT went and found the exact affinity, or let's call it a rough affinity, that Proviron has for the sex hormone binding globulin, and it goes like this. Proviron, or misterolone, exhibits a high binding affinity for sex hormone binding globulin. Specifically, its relative binding affinity is approximately 4 times that of dihydrotestosterone. So DHT, if you were to take DHT, which by the way, you can find in Sourceless if you want to experiment with raw DHT, this stuff is very powerful. DHT binds to the SHBG with a pretty strong affinity. Now, DHT binds to that SHBG with about 5 times the affinity of testosterone. And Proviron, or misterolone, is 4 times more potent. It binds 4 times more higher to the SHBG than DHT itself. So, I mean, Proviron, you know, again, with the exception of primobolan and masteron, to an extent, oxandrolone or Anavar, these things bind to the SHBG. Proviron is the most powerful binder to the SHBG, lowering the SHBG, preventing it from kind of mucking up your free hormones, your testosterone, and allows a lot more bioavailable, active at the tissue level testosterone. One of the really interesting things that this study ultimately ended up finding, which again, a lot of us have sort of confirmed in coaching or self-experimentation, is that the sex hormone binding globulin increases the half-life of circulating ligands, so testosterone, DHT, estradiol, but prevents their entry into target tissues. All right, this is very important. This is where it gets really fucking gnarly, boys. All right, the discussion goes like this. Our findings provide, for the first time, clear experimental validation of the free hormone hypothesis with respect to sex steroids, i.e., that sex hormone binding globulin bound testosterone in the circulation is restricted from entering into target tissues and eliciting its physiological effects in vivo, in a live organism. Then they go unexpectedly. This is just an aside for people to realize. However, the most striking effect of sex hormone binding globulin is not to decrease free T concentration. So it does do that, but that's not the most striking effect of sex hormone binding globulin, but to increase total androgen and estrogen concentrations. This is in the serum, where, by the way, it really isn't doing a whole lot. I mean, the serum, it just doesn't tell you what's happening at the tissue level. The serum is extremely deceptive. You know, this is why people that have sexual dysfunction will look at the serum testosterone and they're at 1,000 or 1,200 total tests, and that's all they're really looking at. Free test is maybe a little above range, and they're not even really paying attention to that, and they're wondering why shit isn't working good, and they're like, they swear off testosterone. Well, testosterone might not be it. I found, you know, basically the opposite of that, which is where you need much higher levels of total T to reach the right numbers of free T. And in a lot of cases, you need inhibition of the sex hormone binding globulin so that you can have at the tissue level biologically available androgens to affect or exert their effects. I found that in a guy with a genetic issue that made him have next to no SHBG, that the guy had pretty low total T, but normal free testosterone. Okay. So if you've got lower SHBG and thus more bioactivity of your actual androgens, you could have like 500, 600 nanograms per deciliter total testosterone, which is low. I mean, that's just a low number of testosterone. But if the SHBG is low enough, or in this case, undetectable, you have pretty high levels, okay, high levels of free testosterone. They do acknowledge, you know, there's this discussion of sex hormone binding globulin being a transport protein, so I want to make sure that people understand that it is to an extent. They go, SHBG has ligand independent effects, so other effects in vivo, alternative mechanisms of action beyond the regulation of sex steroid plasma transport may still contribute to effects on certain organs. So it is entirely possible that the sex hormone binding globulin, you know, you obviously need some of it. You know, one of the purported hypotheses is that the sex hormone binding globulin is there to prevent oversaturation of sex hormones at the tissue level. But what I have found, which is kind of contrary, I think, to a lot of people's like warnings on lowering SHBG, is that in almost all cases, lowering the SHBG with something like misterolone or Proviron does nothing but help people, right? You know, these guys with lower SHBG induced by Proviron normally, this is generally speaking, don't have sexual dysfunction. In fact, the lower the SHBG goes without it being completely fucking bottomed out, but while still being between, let's call it 8 and 15, the more bioactivity they have of androgens, the more free testosterone they have, and the better erections and libido, nocturnal erections, random erections. Like, generally speaking, the better the sexual system is with the lower SHBG and the higher free hormones. It's really the higher free hormones. I've broken down before how Proviron very positively affects the androgen receptor binding domains, particularly binding domains which facilitate genetic action. So it is effectively an androgen receptor modulator in a very positive way. It facilitates genetic action of androgens much more than if Proviron wasn't in your regimen. Like, one of the real powerful aspects of Proviron is its ability to lower the SHBG, increase your free hormones, your testosterone specifically, jack up that free testosterone, and thus make the androgens much more available at target tissues, which is where you want them. It's the androgen receptor activation in penile tissues, which facilitates all the series of cascades of events that leads to an erection, right? I mean, at least it plays a major role. Dopamine, oxytocin, spinal cord plays a role too, but the androgens are critically paramount. Now I want to show you something interesting. Okay, these are my bloods about an hour and a half after dosing 3 pumps of testosterone cream. I probably ran these labs at about 7 a.m. and I woke up at like 5:20 and then put on 3 pumps of 200 milligrams per milliliter, 20% concentration Versa-based transcranial testosterone cream. Now, my total and my free would have went up if I had tested it at the 4 to 6 hour mark. But right here, my total was at 861. Okay, but my free was over the range, but not substantially over the range at 271 picograms per milliliter. Okay, that's 3 pumps of cream. That's just 3 pumps of cream got me 271, which would have probably went up to about 300, 325 at the absolute peak of free testosterone. Now that's high, but it isn't that high. Now here's something really interesting. So in contrast to that, this was in dosing 3 pumps of transcranial cream, same fucking cream, literally same like Toppy Click container of cream, but with 70 milligrams of testosterone propionate every other day. So I had 3 pumps of cream a day and 70 milligrams of prop every other day. The estradiol is low because I was using Aromacin at this point and I took it a little too low. It needs to be a little higher with this high level of testosterone for me personally, but on 70 milligrams of prop every other day, but 3 pumps of cream every day, total is at 3,862. Okay, so that's probably to be expected. But look at the free. Okay, 3 pumps of cream gave me 272, probably peaking at 325, 350 picograms per milliliter free testosterone. 3 pumps of cream, same dose, plus just 70 milligrams of prop every other day, which translates into 35 milligrams a day of testosterone propionate, jacked my free test up all the way up to 1,351.7 picograms per milliliter. Look at the difference. Took the free test up from 270 something to 1,351. That is insanely high free testosterone, insanely crazy biologically available testosterone. And boy, did I feel those androgens when my bloods looked like this. Now, the interesting thing about this is that I wasn't on Proviron when I ran these labs and when I was running that protocol, which tells us that you don't necessarily have to take Proviron or Mysterolin in order to free up free testosterone. If you just inject a fast-acting ester, specifically testosterone propionate, I would assume you would get similar effects from testosterone acetate. Obviously, pretty profound effects from testosterone suspension. Therein, too, you're going to get dramatic increases in free testosterone. This is one of the reasons, by the way, that testosterone propionate is so effective for people relative to sexual function. And it kind of goes into this whole idea, the free hormone hypothesis, and the point that I'm trying to make, which is that whatever your total is, whatever, it's really about the bioactive testosterone, in this case, the free testosterone. I mean, on prop, my erections are fucking fanatical. Everything is good. I'm God, noticeably more aroused. Like, I'm just hornier on testosterone propionate. That's one of the reasons I love it so much. So if you don't want to take Proviron because you're really worried about the SHBG, etc., and you don't want to drop it too low, again, it's really not going to be a problem. It usually isn't a problem until it gets fucking below, like, I mean, if you're at 4, 5, 6, and it might be a problem, but above that, which is, again, it's hard to get it that low, things are just going to function awesomely. You could just take test prop and you're going to jack up that free testosterone. What's the moral of the story? Again and again, we have validation of what we've known for a long time regarding the free hormone hypothesis. Now, there are a couple papers out there that do explain the necessity for SHBG, or at least how having adequate levels of SHBG, which isn't defined, by the way. It could be 7 to 10. SHBG exerts more of a powerful genetic effect. Like, you need the SHBG in order for androgens to be translocated and to affect gene sequences that, make androgens available, the response to androgens noticeable. So the SHBG is important, but how important, right? And how and what concentrations, right? That those studies don't specify. Everything I've seen, including this big long paper, have proven time and time again that when using compounds like Proviron, or in the case of injecting a lot of prop, you get more free hormones, more free testosterone, and you always get a better effect, but specifically at the tissue level. This is relevant to everybody, but I think it's also relevant to people that have serious sexual dysfunction. Okay, PFS, PSSD guys, those guys need high levels almost always of free testosterone, whether it's with the use of testosterone propionate, it's with the use of Proviron with anathate or cypionate or whatever, or it's with a combo of testosterone propionate and Proviron. And in those cases, this makes sense because they've been androgen deprived. They've got a degree of penile fibrosis. They've got collagen deposition. They've got venous leakage. So in those cases, because yes, there are studies proving that testosterone can cure venous leakage, but what's the threshold? In my experience, it's got to be very fucking high. But in those cases, I mean, these guys are getting benefit only from very high free testosterone, right? They can be on 300 milligrams a sip a week, and the free is only sitting at 350 or something. And they're just not getting, they don't even feel it. They don't even notice. They're anabolic. Okay. But at the organ level, at the sex organ level, they're just not getting androgens because the SHBG limits availability at the sex organ level. When it's too high, or when it's not low. That's what it does. So I don't know if this is necessarily nail in the coffin, but I think that the study sort of provides a convincing argument, and it aligns perfectly with my coaching experience, by the way, that lower the SHBG, more free testosterone, better effect specifically at the sex organs and specifically relative to sexual function. All right, boys, as I broke down in the beginning, look, Sourceless is our most popular product we have ever launched, and that includes over Torque. It's like more popular than Torque just because it's powerful. You get access to everything. The most vetted vendors. I mean, these are vendors that have their shit together with every anabolic you can think of, including DHT and obviously including Proviron. If you need to lower SHBG and get your hands on Proviron, get the Sourceless. That's why I built it. It is down in the description of this video. You can buy it and have instant access to it and start ordering literally today. Torque Stack, again, it's like Adderall without the side effects. It's very, very powerful nootropic stack. Turns on the brain right away. You need that extra. Forget the Red Bull. Take Torque. Believe me, you will never buy a Red Bull again. I mean, unless you like the taste of Red Bull. Buy one, get one free right now. torquebogo is the code. You can find that down in the description of this video. And lastly, if you need to hire me for coaching, specifically relative to TRT protocol restructuring, I've seen everything, man. I take guys with protocols that aren't working for them and dial those protocols in to work for them. Got a one-off consult, which is a call with me and a protocol redesign, and then ongoing one-on-one packages where for 3 months, 6 months, or a year, I am by your side every day or every other day, dialing in and fine-tuning your hormone protocol to fix sexual dysfunction, fix problems with TRT, and to get you fired on all cylinders. It's my job. You can hire me for any of that stuff in under a minute at livecortex.com. All right, happy Monday. God, it's almost February. Let's go. We got like 2 months and 3 days, 4 days until April, until spring. Sub to the channel. We do breakdowns like this all of the time, and we will never stop. Hit the like button. It makes a huge difference, boys. Huge difference if you hit that like button. Please hit the like button. Otherwise, hope you have a great day. I hope you had a great weekend. Content coming later this week, and I'll talk to you boys on the next one.